Hello again, and welcome to Demonstration 3. Today I will be featuring this pretty yellow Phalaenopsis orchid. The palette for the yellow Phalaenopsis orchid will be American Journey, Yellow Ochre, Halloween Orange, Earthen Green, and Sap Green, Winsor & Newton, Permanent Magenta, Permanent Rose, and Ultramarine Violet, Holbein, Payne's Gray, and Sepia, Daniel Smith, Lemon Yellow. This is the first painting that I came up with, and it looks very much like the reference photo. The reference photo was taken by my cousin Pam, and I really appreciate her letting me use her pretty photo. She has taken beautiful photography over the years. And it was a very busy painting. I did a lot of work for this fibrous area here, but it's really not that hard. It was just a lot of layering. I started out with a very light color and then worked my way up darker and darker as I went along, and basically they were just slash marks. And then the rocks started out with just a simple wash of cobalt blue, and I threw some salt on it. And I do have a picture of that. I'll show you that. And I do like this rock right here. I did the same thing. I put a little very wet pigment on there and then sprinkled some salt on it. But I decided to try to do a different background for this demonstration. So I came up with this. This is going to be the challenge today, is to get just a nice loose background. And this is on hot press paper. It's very smooth, and that worked out very well, but we've worked with hot press before, so I wanted to try something a little bit different. So I went to one of these watercolor canvases. This is one that a panel that I got from one of the local hobby stores, and I had real trouble getting the control on this, so I'm going to try something today, which is pretty unusual, but we're going to see how it works out. This is a 9x12, and you can get more expensive ones. This one is a professional archival panel, and it's very substantial, and it's a lot more expensive. I'm guessing, I forgot to look it up, but I think it's around $10 for this type of a panel. So eventually I'll use this, but I wanted to try something that I wouldn't mess up on camera today. It was a little less expensive, so we're going to go with this. But in order for me to see what I can do to try to improve my control on this, I'm going to do two paintings at one time. I'm going to do one with 140-pound cold pressed paper, and then I have the panel here that we used previous. I'm going to set them up and try to do both of them at the same time. The only thing I did on this that was different than the first one was that the day previous I completely wet it with water and let it dry out to see if I could get a little bit of a different condition on the surface. But this series we're trying different surfaces, so I thought it would be fun to try one of these boards, and we'll see how it comes out. I'll just say a couple words about the Phalaenopsis species of orchids. There are about 70 different species in this group, and of course many hybrids. The common name of this group of orchids is moth orchids, and it actually comes from the ancient Greek word phalaena, which means moth. And the second part of the word is opsis, and that means the appearance of. So we're looking at the appearance of a moth. And I guess somebody along the line thought that these orchids resembled moths, but it's just an interesting little fact. And to me, it's even more interesting that it's ancient Greek, because my husband and I are currently taking Greek lessons. So it was kind of fun to find that out. Okay, let's get this background on. First thing I will do is to start wetting the background. I'm going to start with a sap green color. But we get this water on first, and I'm going to go a little bit farther out on each side than the green will go. I'm anticipating that the 140 cold press paper will dry faster. We'll see. You go over the lines, don't worry about it because you can always clean that up later. Supposedly, and I've found this to be true, that on the board you can lift a lot easier if you make a mistake. The reason I'm putting the green in this position is I'm going to have some green on the left and the right of the picture, so I want to sort of balance it out. And whenever you do one of these washes, the backgrounds, it will be different each time, which is kind of fun. You can actually see the difference of how the paint is flowing on these two surfaces. Next, I'm going to put some permanent rose on this section. Not quite mixed up there. Just let it do its thing. I think I'll go on this side to prevent this from drying out so quickly. Got a little bit of permanent rose, that's why I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to keep switching back and forth to brushes. See if I can finish this section out right now. I'm gonna blot that out a little bit. I don't want that much pigment. We're going to do Halloween orange next. You see how it's just sitting on the surface? I thought maybe wetting it the night before might help the absorption. You can help it along maybe a little bit if you want to. It's risky. I can also lift this and let it run all over the place if I want to, but I'm going to leave them be this time. Let's jump over to this side. Probably should have done the other one first because this one is going to dry out faster. Next I will do the orange again, just a little. If there's a very small space, you can come back. There's another space right there. You can come back later and fill that in. I may want that to run just a little bit more. Continuing on around, just about done. A little bit of rose here. It's going to be interesting, a lot of orange. just going to put a little bit there. And then a touch more green. This is, I think I will just not get too close to these little intricate parts on the end of the bloom. Now that green and that red aren't going to look too good together, but we'll just let it do its thing. I'm just going to put a little bit in there. It's going to make it turn brown probably. And finish it off with a little orange. You see how it's so hard to control? It's going to turn to mud right there. But I wanted you to see the differences. That's too much. That's good. I'm just going to do a tiny patch of orange right there. Now, this is going to be interesting. One thing you can do is sort of dab up some of this. You don't need all this. And just smooth it out. It doesn't run. You see how it spreads? It doesn't really run that well on this board. One of these days I'll spring for the expensive boards and try one. I'm going to turn this up a little bit to get that red to run out. Might get some interesting looks. You see it lifts very easily on this type of a board. I'm going to leave that on there. Well, obviously we're going to have to let this dry a little bit before we continue on, so I will see you in a few minutes. Well, you can see how these two paintings dried. Very different, really. The surfaces make a big difference. We're getting ready to do some on the flowers, and I'm going to begin by putting down some yellow on sort of an underlayer on some of these buds. Just a quick layer of lemon yellow. I actually had to shoot this one with the hairdryer to get it to dry. Now for the main petals here, these are relatively flat, so I'm not going to do a lot of shadowing, but a little bit, but not much. And I wanted to make it to be just a little bit duller than the lemon yellow, this bright yellow, so I added a little bit of yellow ochre to it. Let's see, we've got a little bit of a mix here, and I'm going to apply it pretty watery. I'll try to leave toward the edges white, just a nice thin layer. When I come around to these two petals underneath, I will make those a little darker. I I'm just going to be skipping around because I want them to dry a little bit. I don't want things, wet surfaces touching up against each other. I'll put a first layer on the leaves. Hope I don't get my hands in there. It's going to be difficult to keep my hands off that area. I just mixed a little earth and green with the sap green. It's pretty light. Now on the reference painting, you will notice that there is a nice bright orange area right in the center, so we'll do that next. We're just trying to skip around, give everything a chance to dry. I can do these two underneath, these two petals underneath now. I'm just going to add a little bit more of the yellow ochre to make it darker. Do it down here. This is getting difficult at this angle. I may tip this just a little bit. When that dries, if it turns out to be too dark, you can always lift some off. Next will be some ultramarine violet. I'll leave the little hooks on the ends of the bloom. I'll leave those alone for now. I'll just do that as a finishing touch. Everything should be dry. This is not dry right up there. I better not. Now this one is. While I have the violet out, there's a little area just by this area here. It's a little tricky. I'm going to try to fade it out. Put some yellow in there with that one. Wow, that one's not even near dry. going to turn that because I'm likely to put my hand on that leaf. Just going to turn it this way for now. We'll do a little bit on these buds. I want this larger bud to be a little lighter, so I'm going to do more of the sap green on that one. I think I'll wet these again to see if I can smooth out those lines. That one, I don't know if I'm going to bother with it on that one. Let that soften up for a minute. I'm going to mix some permanent rose and permanent magenta to get kind of a nice dark pink. Everything's wet. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the sepia and mix some of the permanent magenta with it for the stem. Kind of an odd color combination, but it works. I don't want to mess that up. You can see that it's kind of a dark brown with a little bit of a rose tinge to it. I think to save time, I will finish working on this one and lay that one aside because you can see the difference pretty drastically, I think, on how they absorb. So I'm going to just kind of set that over a little bit because I can't really work on it. It's still way too wet. And I'll continue on with this one. Just trying to get rid of those hard lines. I think I'll stop for just a minute and let this dry a little bit and see if I can get rid of these hard lines, and I'll be right back. All right, let's work on the last of the details. There are just a few more things to do. Hopefully everything's dry enough. Just going to put the last few shadows and so on these buds here. It's a little too dark. you could glaze over this with some more yellow, or just keep adding layers to it until you get it the way you like it. Actually, I want that to be a little bit drier. Let's just switch over to here, this area here. I'm going to put some straight permanent magenta on these two areas. I want it nice and dark. In other words, darker than this area. Now in the middle on this orange, I'm going to take a little bit of the same thing and make some slash marks. Start with them pretty much straight in the middle. And as I come out toward the sides, I'm going to curve them a little bit. And down here, these little hooks on the end of the flower, I'm going to put just some light ultramarine violet. When it dries, you could make another darker line there to kind of show that they're coming up like this. Now, a little bit of shadowing on these petals here. I'm going to use a little bit of Payne's Gray, very light. I'm going to have to turn it. Too dark. It looks kind of drastic right now, but when it dries, it'll dry pretty light. Leave it sort of light or white toward the center. I'm just going to keep turning it. It's easier. Now right here, you want to make sure that you show that this petal is in front of this petal. Oops. Got into the magenta. That might be pretty. You could even add more yellow if you want to. On top of that, when it dries. Now I need to put some shadowing underneath here. Also, if you want to, if this is too dark, you can always lighten it up a little bit, especially toward the edge. Let's soften this line. Put a little bit of gray here. And I would do more work over here, most likely. And I think that I would probably do some lifting. There are several layers on there, but you see how that is going to help make it look a little bit nicer. You can see how that's popping it out a little bit. So you could keep working on that. And I have one more thing to finish, and that's the leaves. I'm just trying to soften those lines up a little bit. Do that later. I'm going to just finish these very quickly, and I'm not going to do much. I'm just going to sweep around the margins, try to soften those lines up. You could have put another layer or two on those, making sure each layer dries before you put another one on. But they are kind of light. That makes them look a little more realistic if you soften those lines. I think I'm going to stop. Now, on the board, let's just take a quick look at that. I still need to do a lot of work on this if I was to, and I would need plenty of time. I would need to let things dry out in between, but it's not unsalvageable. There's never a painting that's unsalvageable. If you would like to frame one that's on these boards, you don't even have to use acrylic or glass. You can just frame it like you would an acrylic or an oil painting, but I would recommend that you would spray it with a fixative after it's completely finished and dry. That will keep everything in place, and it will be there for a long time, because this could be vulnerable to altering a little bit, especially if water was to splash on it or something like that. So that would be a great idea to put that fixative on it. All right, I'm on to the next project. Now, don't get discouraged about using the board. I did have success with it using the same type of board that I just worked with a few minutes ago. And this is a dendrobium, which is going to be featured in the next video, demonstration 4. And this one did not have a lot of looseness to it, so I think that's the problem. It was a tight painting, and you can see it's on that same kind of board, and I have not sprayed it with fixative yet. But what I'm going to do in the next demonstration is use a very special paint, and I'm going to simplify this design. This is really intricate, but I will put all of these on the Facebook page if somebody would like to try it. Paint Your Garden in Watercolor. Don't forget, all the sketches and everything will be on there. Reference photos, the paintings, and everything you need. So this next one, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet, but I will simplify it down a little bit, and we're going to be using some pearlescent paint. I'm really excited about that. I'm pretty fascinated with it. Now, this one I mixed partly with pearlescent paint and partly with the regular watercolor paint. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's going to be kind of fun to use something a little different. So that's kind of the plan, and that one is half and half pearlescent and half regular paint. I did do one, a simple one, just to see how it would look with full pearlescent colors, and I don't know if you can see that effect, but that is what it looks like. So I hope you will be able to join me for demonstration 4. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks. Have fun.